Hello and welcome to another understanding of nested loops tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be looking at how do you go about pseudocoding a nested loop. For example, if I have declared a variable of type integer and the name of the variable is seconds. First of all, we're going to be writing the example where we're going to be looking at the single loop, which is not nested, and then we're going to try to nest the loop. So here is an example using the for loop. Here we have a variable called seconds. The starting value is 0 and the ending value is 59. And every time we run this loop, we want to do this, that we want to output to the screen that seconds is and the value of the seconds. Now notice I'm using the plus sign as a concatenation, but in Visual Basic, as you have learned in the past, we use ampersand as concatenation. So it pretty much means the same thing, but in pseudocode you're not restricted to using the syntax of any particular language. Sometimes people use commas instead of plus. I could very well use an ampersand, or I could very well use comma. Either way, in pseudocode everything will going to be working just fine. Followed by a statement called next for. Now this example pretty much takes care of displaying the value of seconds for 59 times. So every time it runs, it displays one value for seconds. The first time the seconds is 0, then the next time it becomes 1, 2, 3, and it goes like this. So if we look at the working of this particular example, so far it pretty much runs for 60 times. Every time it displays one value for seconds. So at the end of the process we can say, technically speaking, the loop runs 1 minute. That means it runs through the values that are the different values within a minute. Now if you want to change this nested loop, if you want to change this into a nested loop where we control the inner loop for seconds and then we run the minutes through the outer loops. So we're going to be changing this by first of all introducing two sets of variables. We need one variable for seconds and one variable for minutes. And here is my seconds variable, of course, which will going to be nested inside. But then I need the level above, which will going to be for minutes. Now, since there are 60 minutes in 1 hour, so I'm running 0 through 59. So that means first time the outer loop runs, it's pretty much running for the 0th minute. So then as the seconds complete all their cycle, then the minutes move to 1. That means 1 minute has passed. Like that, when 59 minutes have passed, the next iteration will actually be changing it to an hour. So this is pretty much the pseudocode for the logic that we have just talked about in our first tutorial. So let me increase the font size so that you can pretty much see the working of this code. And I can turn off the bullets, which comes by default. And then let me fix on nesting. The nesting is not required. However, this is only for code readability, just so that you can see this statement. This statement is inside this loop. And this whole loop is inside this loop. So this next for is for this loop, and this next for is for this loop. Now you may be wondering, how does the computer knows? Well, since we started a for before ending the first for. So how does a for ends? By using next for. So it automatically assumes that this for is inside that for. Now, this next for, the very first next for that comes through, is automatically thought by the compiler to be the closing for the inner one, and the next one followed by is considered to be one for the outer one. So this is pretty much the working of this loop. Now I'm going to be making one change here. I'm going to be making that change here such that I'm going to be leaving colon here like that. But I'm going to add minutes. So it should display minutes, colon, seconds. So this is how this loop can be treated as two levels. Now I also want to display an hour alongside. So I'm going to be introducing my third variable called hours. And now I can take the same example and nest it further just for readability. That's it, just for readability. Now I'm going to be adding a third level here, so that is why we did that. So we have 4 hours equals to 0 to 23, minutes equals 0 to 59, seconds equals 0 to 59, and then this is the next for, which is closing for seconds. This is the next for, closing for minutes, and the next one is the next for, closing for hours. Now in VB, as you have learned, that as soon as you write the opening block, VB automatically writes the closing block for you. That way you don't have to forget closing a block. But here in pseudocode writing, we had to make sure. So what I do when I'm doing pseudocode writing, I put the next statement right away so that I don't forget it later on. But this is how you may want to balance that there should be 3 closing next for, because we have 3 opening and for. Sometimes in pseudocode writing, you may see something like this, that authors may write the words and for, because pseudocode writing does not have to match the syntax of Visual Basic. It is something that is close enough, a resemblance to probably some kind of a block structure. Sometimes people use opening and closing curly braces if they are C programmers of the past, and so on and so forth. So here, if we make one final modification, which is also to introduce hours followed by a colon. So here the output will be the hours, colon, minutes, colon, second, just like a digital clock is usually displayed. So the sample output, just in case if you want to know, the sample output of something like this could be, let's say 12, 45, 53. So now when 53 will reach 59, this will still remain 45. But when 53 will reach 59 will reach 60, then 60 should basically change this to a 46. That logic is still, of course, missing from this loop. But at this point, what we're doing is pretty much displaying the clock as per the pseudocode is concerned. When you go and take this idea in the actual implementation in the programming language, you probably would have to introduce control. For example, in Visual Basic, there's a timer control, which will going to make sure that this loop runs after every 1 second, so that when the digital clock is moving, it actually show you a time lapse, a latency for 1 second as it's moving through. But anyway, so far this idea for the nested loop was to introduce you as to how you go about pseudocode, the idea that I introduced to you in the last tutorial, which was this hour hand, minute hand, second hand, and here's a pseudocode implementation of that idea. Hope you would have enjoyed this tutorial. Catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching.